I still remember the sound of her knocking. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft, broken taps. When I opened the door, my twin sister stood there trembling, her face hidden beneath a hood. Then she looked up, and I saw everything. Her lips split, bruises blossoming across her jaw, fear in her eyes where laughter used to live. My breath froze. Who did this? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I already knew. Her husband, Daniel, the charming lawyer who'd once toasted at our wedding table, saying, "I got lucky twice because I married the better twin." We'd laughed back then. I thought he was joking, but that night, she wasn't laughing. She was shaking. She told me everything. How the bruises had started as accidents, then discipline. How he isolated her, controlled her, silenced her, and how she had nowhere else to go. I remember holding her, feeling her ribs under my hands. And in that moment, something cold took root in me. Not rage, something quieter. Precision. People always said we looked identical. Same eyes, same voice, same birthmark near the collarbone. She wore softness. I wore control. But underneath we were mirrors. So when I told her, "Let me handle it," she looked terrified. "Don't, please. He'll kill you." "No," I said. "He'll see you." The plan came together piece by piece. I knew his habits, his routine, his arrogance. He worked late, drank whiskey before bed, never noticed details that didn't serve him. That weekend, my sister disappeared to a safe house, and I became her. I moved into their home, wearing her clothes, her perfume, her silence. He never suspected. He was too drunk on control. The first night he barked. Dinner cold again. I smiled softly. "I'll do better next time." He scoffed, sat down, ate, but I watched him. Every bite, every twitch, every flicker of ego. It wasn't enough to hurt him. I wanted him to unravel. I found his secrets faster than I expected. Hidden bank accounts, bribes disguised as consulting fees, a mistress. He took photos, copied passwords, forwarded emails to an anonymous account. Then, little by little, I started making him doubt himself. Changed the phone lock he swore he knew, moved his cufflinks, left bruises on my own neck. Faint, believable. When he accused me, I gasped. "You did this last night." He froze. What I saw the confusion, the crack in his certainty, the beginning of fear. By the 3rd week he was spiraling. His partners questioned missing funds. His mistress ghosted him. He stopped sleeping, started drinking more. One night, I found him pacing in the dark, muttering, "She's messing with me." I stood in the doorway and whispered, "Maybe you're just losing control." He turned, eyes bloodshot. "You think I don't know what's happening?" I smiled. "No, Daniel, that's the problem. You never knew." The night it ended, I made sure he was awake. I wore her favorite blue dress, the one he forbade her to wear because it drew attention. He stared, confused. "Why are you dressed like that?" "For the police," I said. He frowned. "What are you talking about?" I held up the phone recording. "You'll want to sit down." I played the audio, his voice recorded over weeks. The threats, the yelling, the slap that echoed through their walls. Then the photos, the bank transfers. His mouth went dry. "You can't prove I can, and I will." The knock came right on time. Detectives stepped in. They had everything. As they cuffed him, he looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. And then his face changed. His eyes widened, tracing the edge of my jaw, the shape of my stare. He finally saw it. He started. "No," I said, my voice calm. "I'm not her." My sister watched from the car as they took him away. She cried quietly, hand trembling in mine. "You could have been hurt," she whispered. I was careful. She turned to me. "He knows it wasn't me now." "Good," I said. "Let him remember that for the rest of his life." They sentenced him 6 months later. Fraud, assault, obstruction. His name stripped from the firm, reputation ruined. My sister rebuilt, slowly, carefully. She started painting again, smiling again, living again, and me. I moved on, too. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment. The exact second he realized he'd been out, that the woman standing before him wasn't his victim, but his reckoning. I told him once, before they dragged him out. "You thought you could break her," he sneered. "And what did you do? Save her?" I leaned in close. "No," I whispered. "I replaced her." He found out who took his place, and he never forgot. 11:45 p.m. My phone lit up the dark room with a single notification. A forwarded bill from the Zenith Lounge. $15,000. The total glowed on the screen like an accusation. Below it was a text from my mother. "Sandra, just put this on your card. It's the least you can do after ruining the mood with your cheap dress." A second later, a heart emoji popped up. My sister Tiffany, of course, liked the message. I sat there in the quiet hum of my home office, surrounded by monitors that tracked global market trends and hotel acquisitions. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just stared at the screen. They truly believed I was their ATM. They thought my silence was permission. But silence isn't always agreement. Sometimes it's just the quiet before the execution. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't send an angry emoji. Instead, I opened my laptop. The screen hummed to life, casting a blue light over my hands. To my family, these hands were only good for shelving books at the public library or pouring wine for my father's business partners. They had no idea. These same hands controlled a boutique hotel empire spanning 3 continents. I bypassed my work email and logged into my private investment backend. 2-factor authentication, retinal scan, the dashboard loaded. I scrolled past the real estate portfolios and the tech stocks until I found a folder buried deep in the archives. It was labeled simply, Family Debt Consolidation. I clicked it open. It wasn't just a file. It was a graveyard of their mistakes. There were the receipts for my father's gambling debts from 2018, bought 4 pennies on the dollar from loan sharks who were threatening to break his legs. There were the credit card statements my mother had maxed out on designer handbags she couldn't afford, consolidated into a low-interest loan I managed personally. There was the lease on the luxury condo Tiffany lived in, paid for by a shell company I owned. For years, I had been the silent architect of their safety. I had been catching them before they hit the ground over and over again. Looking at the numbers tonight, I finally asked myself the question I had been avoiding for a decade. But it wasn't love. It was something far more insidious. It was the invisible chain of the survivor. When you grow up in a house where affection is a limited resource, you start to believe that love is a transaction. You convince yourself that if you just pay enough, if you endure enough, if you fix enough of their messes, eventually they will look at you and see a daughter instead of a utility. You build your own prison without bars. You tell yourself that your usefulness is the only thing keeping you inside the family. You think you are being a good daughter, but really you are just a hostage paying your own ransom, hoping the kidnappers will eventually decide to love you. But tonight, staring at that $15,000 dinner bill, the chain snapped. I realized that no amount of money would ever be enough. The ransom had no limit. I could buy them the moon, and they would complain that it was too bright. My compassion hadn't been a gift. It had been a subscription they had overdrafted for years, and tonight, their subscription had expired. I navigated to the sub-menu labeled Housing Allowance, Jeffrey and Sandra. The status bar glowed green. Auto-renew, active. I didn't hesitate. I didn't shake. My finger hovered over the trackpad. This wasn't revenge. This was accounting. It was a correction of a market error. I clicked cancel. The screen flashed. Are you sure? I clicked confirm. The status bar turned red. Terminated. I did the same for the credit cards. Terminated. I did the same for Tiffany's car lease. Terminated. One by one, I turned off the lights in their financial lives. It took less than 3 minutes to dismantle the safety net I had spent 6 years weaving. When I was done, the total balance due flashed on the screen. $5.2 million. That was what they owed me, and that was what I was going to collect. I closed the laptop and turned around. In the dim light of the bedroom, I could see the outline of Caleb sleeping. He shifted, reaching out an arm to the empty space where I should have been. He was the only one who knew. He knew I wasn't a librarian. He knew I wasn't weak. He knew that beneath the quiet cardigans and the silence, I was a shark. He had begged me months ago to stop funding them. He had told me they would never change. I hadn't listened then, because I was still wearing the invisible chain, but I wasn't wearing it anymore. I walked back to the bed and slid under the covers. My heart was beating slow and steady. There was no guilt. There was only the cold, sharp clarity of the morning to come. They wanted a reaction. They were going to get a foreclosure. 7 a.m. The sun hadn't even fully crested over the Los Angeles skyline when the assault began. My phone vibrated against the marble countertop of the kitchen island. It wasn't a gentle wake-up call. It was a barrage. 17 missed calls, 42 text messages. And now the phone was ringing again. It was Sandra. I answered, putting it on speaker so I could pour my coffee. I didn't say hello. I didn't need to. You ungrateful, spiteful little brat. Her voice screeched through the speaker so loud it distorted. Do you have any idea what you just did? Do you have any concept of the humiliation? I took a sip of the dark roast. Good morning, Mother. I assume the bill wasn't settled to your satisfaction. Settled. Settled. She was hyperventilating. The card was declined. Mina. Declined. In front of the entire staff. In front of Bryce. We tried to put it on your father's platinum card and the machine literally laughed at us. The manager came over. He looked at us like we were criminals. Do you know what it feels like to have a waiter pity you? I knew exactly what it felt like. I had felt it every time I wore my thrift store clothes to their gala dinners. I had felt it every time they introduced me as the quiet one while Tiffany posed for the cameras. It sounds like a cash flow problem, I said, my voice flat. Perhaps you should have checked your balance before ordering the $12,000 vintage. Don't. You dare lecture me on finance, she screamed. You cut us off. I know you did. I tried to use the emergency fund for the Uber home, and it was gone. You stranded us. There. Bryce had to call his mother to Venmo him money for a cab. Bryce, he's an influencer. Mina. He knows people. If this gets out, if people find out we couldn't pay a dinner bill, we are ruined. That was it. Not we miss you. Not why are you doing this. Just the panic of a stage actor realizing the spotlight has been cut and the audience can finally see the cheap plywood of the set. Fix this, she demanded. Transfer the money right now. And apologize to Tiffany. She's been crying all night. You ruined her networking opportunity. I hung up. I didn't block her. Not yet. I needed the data. I needed to see just how deep the rot went. I opened Instagram. Sure enough, there was Tiffany's story posted 3 hours ago. A black screen with tiny white text accompanied by a sad acoustic song. It's crazy how the people closest to you are the ones who want to see you fail the most. Some people just can't handle your shine, so they try to cut your power. Jealousy is a disease. Get well soon, sis. Hashtag toxica family. Hashtag rising above. Hashtag haters gonna hate. I almost laughed. The gaslighting was breathtaking. She had reframed my refusal to be robbed as an act of jealousy. She truly believed that my existence revolved around envying her ability to take selfies. Then came the voicemail from my father, Jeffrey. I played it. His voice was thick, slurring slightly. He'd been drinking. Mina, you listen to me. I know who put you up to this. It's that husband of yours. That substitute teacher. Nobody. He's in your ear, isn't he? Telling you to hold out on your family. He's a leech, Mina. A parasite. He sees a little bit of money in your account, and he wants it for himself. You're letting a stranger destroy your bloodline. You fix this, or so help me God. I will come down there and remind you who made you. I looked over at Caleb. He was sitting at the table reading a tech journal on his tablet. He wasn't a substitute teacher. He was the founder of a learning platform valued at $900 million. He had bought my father's gambling debts anonymously 3 times just to keep my childhood home from being firebombed by bookies. He was the only reason they still had a roof over their heads. And they called him a leech. Caleb looked up, hearing the venom in the voicemail. He didn't get angry. He just looked at me with a sad, knowing smile. They're not mad that they lost the money, he said softly. They're mad that they lost their power over you. He was right. For years they had operated on a simple premise. I was the resource, and they were the management. Resources don't have opinions. Resources don't have boundaries, and resources certainly don't turn off the tap. But I wasn't a resource anymore. I was the chief executive officer of my own life, and I had just identified a massive liability. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't respond to the text. I didn't engage with the Instagram drama. To them, this was an emotional war. They wanted to fight. They wanted me to scream back so they could call me hysterical. They wanted me to defend myself so they could twist my words. But I wasn't going to fight. I was going to liquidate. I stood up and smoothed down my blazer. It was time to go to work. Not to the library, but to the glass-walled office downtown where my real name was on the door. Are you ready? Caleb asked. No, I said, grabbing my keys. I'm overdue. I didn't block their numbers. Blocking them would have been emotional. It would have been a reaction. I needed to be proactive. I silenced the notifications and got into my car. I drove past the public library on 4th Street. That was where my family thought I worked. For 5 years, I had led them believe I spent my days stamping due dates and organizing the Dewey Decimal System. It was a convenient fiction. It made me unthreatening. It made me safe to bully because in their minds, a librarian didn't have the resources to fight back. I didn't stop at the library. I drove 3 blocks west to the glass and steel skyscraper that dominated the skyline. I pulled into the underground garage, bypassing the visitor lot and sliding into the spot marked Reserved, CEO. Taking the private elevator up to the 42nd floor, I felt the shift happen in my body. The hunched shoulders of the dutiful daughter straightened. The apologetic expression vanished. I wasn't Mina the disappointment anymore. I was Mina, the majority shareholder. The doors opened directly into the lobby of MV Holdings. The receptionist nodded as I walked past. Good morning, Miss Vane. Elena is waiting for you in conference room. Elena was my attorney. She wasn't a family lawyer who handed out tissues and talked about reconciliation. She was a corporate shark who specialized in hostile takeovers and asset liquidation. She didn't deal in feelings. She dealt in leverage. I walked into the conference room. Elena was already there, a stack of files arranged on the mahogany table with military precision. I saw the transaction logs, Elena said, not looking up from her tablet. You terminated the housing allowance. Aggressive. It wasn't aggressive enough, I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. They think this is a tantrum. They think I'm just holding my breath until they apologize. I need them to understand that the bank is closed permanently. Elena slid a document toward me. Then we don't send a letter. We send a notice of debt acceleration. I looked at the paperwork. It wasn't a Dear Dad note. It was a legal demand. It outlined every loan I had purchased, every credit card balance I had consolidated, every car lease I had underwritten. The terms of those loans had always been soft. Pay when you can, 0 interest, family terms. But there was a clause in the fine print, a clause Elena had insisted on years ago. The lender reserves the right to demand full repayment of the principal balance at any time for any reason. The total principal is $5,200,000, Elena said. If we execute this, they have 30 days to pay the full amount. If they fail to pay, we move to asset seizure. We take the house. We take the cars. We garnish any wages they might actually have. I ran my finger over the figure. $5 million. That was the price tag of my silence. That was what it had cost to keep them comfortable while they treated me like a servant. Do it, I said. Draft it. Serve them tomorrow. This is the nuclear option. Mina, Elena warned. Her voice held no judgment, just facts. Once you send this, there is no going back to Sunday dinners. You aren't their daughter anymore. You are their creditor. I haven't been their daughter for a long time, I replied. I've just been their sponsor. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Caleb. I just got a voicemail from your dad. He threatened to come to my school and get me fired. He called me a broke loser who is corrupting his daughter. I stared at the message. They were attacking Caleb now. They were going after the only person who had ever loved me without conditions. Caleb sent a second text. Take the gloves off, Mina. Drop the veil. Let them see who we really are. He gave me the signal. For years, we had concealed his wealth to protect his dignity and our peace. But they mistook humility for weakness. I instructed Elena to send the courier package on company letterhead and redirect all correspondence to my office. I wanted them to see the logo and understand exactly who they had provoked. Somewhere, my parents were already raging. I was done managing their emotions. I had a business to run. Then Elena paused. It wasn't an asset. It was a liability. A second mortgage from 3 years ago, taken out on the family home for $250,000. I hadn't authorized it. The co-signer's signature bore my name. It was a perfect forgery. But on the signing date, I was in Tokyo. My father had forged my signature, using my credit to fund Tiffany's so-called success Dubai trips, a G-Wagon, a fantasy life, financed by fraud. If he had defaulted, the bank would have come for me. This wasn't a civil matter. It was bank fraud, an aggravated identity theft, federal prison, mandatory minimum. I didn't flinch. I told Elena to prepare the police report, but hold it. I needed an admission. Public. Irreversible. I invited them to dinner at the Zenith Lounge. They arrived arrogant, overdressed, convinced this was my surrender. They ordered extravagantly, assuming I would pay. When the check came, it didn't go to me. It went to Caleb. The waiter addressed him by name and asked him to review deed transfer documents. Caleb signed casually. The bill went to the house account. That was when it landed. We owned the building. We owned the restaurant. I slid a folder across the table. a notice of debt acceleration. They owed me $5.2 million payable in 30 days. Beneath it was the forged loan application. I told them plainly, I hadn't reported it yet. They would avoid prison, but they would lose everything else. Tiffany's influencer boyfriend left immediately. Status evaporated fast without money behind it. 30 days later, they defaulted. I sent the eviction crew. Watching them move into a walk-up they once mocked, I understood their arrogance had always been rented. Without possessions, there was nothing underneath. We sold the house and donated every dollar of recovered equity to a scholarship fund for first-generation students, turning greed into opportunity. I deleted the last remaining folder tied to them and closed my laptop. For the first time, the prison door was quiet, but unlocked. If you've ever had to buy your own freedom from the people who should have given it freely, you're not alone. My blood turned to ice as Amanda slid each glossy photograph across the polished mahogany dining table. The snapshots showed me, head tilted, hand occasionally touching an arm, smiling and engaged with different men in restaurants and cafes around the city. The sharp intake of breath from my mother-in-law Eleanor filled the suddenly airless room. Look at these, Amanda said, her voice dripping with performative concern as she turned to my husband. While David has been working himself to exhaustion, she's been running around town with other men. She placed her hand on his shoulder, standing too close to him, while Jessica, the woman he'd been sleeping with for months, sat silently at his other side. Amanda's eyes gleamed with triumph as she delivered her final blow. Now, you don't have to feel guilty about Jessica, and you definitely don't have to give Sophie anything in the divorce. My name is Sophie Bennett. I'm 32, and this is the story of how I turned my husband's family's betrayal into the most important lesson they'd ever learn. The family I had devoted 8 years to gathered around those photos like vultures. Eleanor picked one up with trembling fingers, her voice breaking with practiced disappointment. Sophie, how could you? We welcomed you into our family. Once, her words would have cut deep. Now, I just observed her performance with clinical detachment. What do you have to say for yourself? Amanda demanded, one hand propped on her hip, the other dramatically pointing at the evidence spread before everyone. I took a deliberately slow sip of water, my eyes moving across the table. David still wouldn't meet my gaze. His parents looked appropriately devastated, though I noticed his father, George, seemed more uncomfortable than angry. Amanda stood tall, her posture radiating righteousness. Nice pictures, I sighed calmly. The lighting is excellent. You must have paid your private investigator quite a lot. Amanda's triumphant smile faltered. This wasn't the tearful denial she had scripted for this moment. That's all you have to say, she snapped. You're not even going to deny it. I reached into my purse, feeling everyone tense, waiting for tears or perhaps a desperate confession. Instead, I placed my tablet on the table, its screen dark and reflective against the wood. Why would I deny it? My voice remained steady. Those men are all divorce lawyers. The silence that followed was absolute. What? Amanda stuttered, her composure cracking. I pointed to each photo methodically. That's James Morrison, the best family lawyer in the city. This is Michael Turner. His firm specializes in cases involving infidelity. And this dinner, that's William Parker. He's particularly skilled at handling cases where people try to hide assets before a divorce. Amanda's face drained of color. David suddenly found his water glass fascinating. You see, I continued, when I discovered David and Jessica 3 months ago, I decided to prepare properly. You're lying, Amanda said, but uncertainty had replaced her confidence. I activated my tablet, displaying emails and signed agreements. The wonderful thing about legal consultations is that there's always documentation. I scrolled through the files deliberately. But that's not even the most interesting part, I added, finally looking directly at David. What do you mean? Eleanor's voice trembled. Well, I said, During one of these meetings, I learned something fascinating about recent property transfers in this family. Lots of money and houses changing hands, new companies being formed. I let the implications settle over the room. George shifted uncomfortably in his chair. David frowned, turning to his father. Dad, is that why you had me sign those papers last month? You said it was just routine family business. I watched realization dawn on his face. His family wasn't just helping him cheat. They were systematically hiding assets before the divorce. David, sweetheart, we were just protecting you, Eleanor began. Actually, I cut her off. You were committing fraud, she sobbed. Fraud. I smiled, thinly. And my lawyers have documented everything. Amanda collapsed into a chair, the architect of her perfect trap suddenly finding herself ensnared. You knew, she whispered. You knew this whole time. I nodded, gathering my belongings. Next time you hire a private investigator, make sure they're not working for both sides. I stood, smoothing my dress. Oh, and David, your lawyer will receive the paperwork tomorrow. You might want to read it carefully, especially the part about fraud. At the door, I turned back to Amanda. Thanks for the photos. They'll make excellent evidence. My heels struck the floor like a metronome as I walked out. Only when I reached my car did I finally allow myself a small private smile. They thought they had trapped me, but they had no idea what was coming. The next few days unleashed chaos. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from David's family. Threats mingled with tearful pleas. Amanda cycled between rage and panic, her texts growing increasingly desperate. You can't do this to us. We're family. Her latest message read. That word family lingered in my mind. They hadn't treated me like family when they were planning to leave me with nothing. I archived her message without responding and focused on my preparations. James Morrison's law office projected exactly the power it intended. Gleaming wood supple leather chairs and an atmosphere of quiet authority. I reviewed documents in the conference room while waiting for the others to arrive. Right on schedule, David entered with his lawyer, followed by Eleanor and George. Amanda trailed behind, attempting confidence, but failing visibly. Mrs. Bennet, James greeted me with a professional nod. Shall we begin? I watched David's expression as James methodically presented our evidence. He paled noticeably when we displayed our timeline. Every suspicious property transfer, every hastily created company, every deliberate attempt to hide money. Eleanor clutched his arm when James mentioned potential criminal charges. This is nonsense, David's lawyer protested. These were normal family business decisions. Were they? I asked, sliding forward a stack of documents. Because these records show my name was removed from family business assets exactly 3 months ago, precisely when David began his affair. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? George shifted uncomfortably. He had always been the weakest link, too concerned about his social standing to risk public scandal. Now, James continued, we're prepared to be reasonable. Mrs. Bennet helped build this family's success. She simply wants her fair share. Fair share, Amanda snapped. She's trying to ruin us. I turned to her, maintaining my composure. No, Amanda, I'm protecting what I helped create. I paused. Would you like me to play the recording of you and David discussing how to keep the gold digger from getting anything? Her face went white. David's head snapped up. You recorded us? No, I replied calmly. Your mistress did. Jessica was quite helpful once I showed her proof that you were planning to discard her, too, once you'd secured your assets. The room erupted. Eleanor dissolved into tears. George demanded to speak with his personal lawyer. Amanda screamed about betrayal. Through it all, I sat quietly, watching my husband realize how thoroughly he'd been out. Here's what's going to happen. James spoke over the chaos, his voice commanding immediate silence. We have documented evidence of attempted fraud. We can pursue this criminally, or we can reach a reasonable settlement today. Your choice. David's lawyer requested a moment with his client. As they huddled in the corner, I could see the fight draining from David's body. He'd always been arrogant, convinced of his own cleverness, but now he looked hollowed out. "We'll agree to fair terms," his lawyer finally announced. "Excellent," James smiled. "Mrs. Bennet has already outlined her requirements." He distributed copies of my settlement proposal. I'd been thorough. I wanted what I'd helped build, nothing more. "This is outrageous!" Eleanor exclaimed, but George placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Sign it, David," he said quietly. "We can't risk this getting out." As David picked up the pen, Amanda made one last desperate attempt. "Wait, those photos? They were in public places. She was flaunting these meetings." I couldn't help but laugh softly. "Of course they were public. I wanted you to see them. Every lunch, every coffee meeting, I knew you were having me followed. I just made sure your investigator captured exactly what I wanted you to see." The realization that they'd been played at their own game finally silenced them. One by one, the documents were signed. As James gathered the paperwork, I stood to leave. "Sophie," David called, his voice strange. "When did you get so calculating?" I paused at the door. "I learned from the best, didn't I? Family taught me." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. As I walked out of the office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about winning. It's about showing them they underestimated you all along. Outside, the autumn air felt crisp and clean. My phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. "It's done. Thank you for showing me the truth about him." I smiled, remembering how easily David's mistress had become my ally once I showed her proof of his pattern, his promises to her, his plans to discard her just like me. After securing his wealth, sometimes the strongest alliances come from unexpected places. Driving home, I thought about family, not the one that had betrayed me, but the one I would build for myself now on my own terms. 6 months after the settlement, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping coffee and watching the city awaken. Morning sunlight cast long shadows across my newly furnished living room, highlighting the fresh start I'd created. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, of all people. We'd maintained an unlikely friendship after everything. "You won't believe who I just saw at Riverside Cafe. Amanda. She actually tried to pretend she didn't see me." I smiled, remembering how thoroughly the family had unraveled after our meeting. Their carefully constructed facade of perfect family business had cracked under the weight of their own schemes. George had retired early, claiming health issues, but everyone knew it was to avoid the whispers at his precious country club. Eleanor had thrown herself into charity work, desperately trying to maintain their social standing. Amanda, perhaps, had faced the harshest reality check. Her role in the attempted fraud had cost her position in the family company. Last I'd heard, she was working as a junior accountant at a small firm, a significant step down from her former executive title. My phone rung. "James Morrison." "Sophie," he greeted warmly. "Just wanted to let you know the last of the transfers are complete. Everything's officially settled." "Thank you, James, for everything." "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in all my years practicing law, I've never seen someone handle betrayal with such strategic precision. Have you ever considered a career change?" I laughed, but his words resonated. In outmaneuvering David and his family, I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. Strength, cunning, and an ability to see several moves ahead. Later that afternoon, I met Laura, my closest friend, for lunch. She'd been my rock throughout everything, one of the few people who knew the whole story from the beginning. "Have you heard?" she asked, sliding into her seat. "David's been demoted. Apparently, some of his business decisions during the divorce drama didn't sit well with the board." I shook my head. "I'm not surprised. He always did think he was smarter than everyone else." "Speaking of smart," Laura leaned forward. "How's the new venture going?" I reflected on the woman I'd been a year ago, trusting, naive, willing to believe in family loyalty above all else. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, but not bitter. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Eleanor. I miss you. The family isn't the same without you. I archived it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. That evening, as I reviewed applications for my firm's mentorship program, I reflected on how life had changed. The family that had tried to destroy me had inadvertently set me free. Their attempts to leave me with nothing had pushed me to become something more than I'd ever imagined. The doorbell rang. Jessica, with a bottle of wine. Our monthly catch-up sessions had become a tradition of sorts. To Karma, she raised her glass, settling onto my couch. David's dating someone new. By the way, poor girl has no idea what she's getting into. Should we warn her? I asked, half joking. Jessica laughed. Something tells me she'll figure it out on her own. Besides, I hear she's quite clever with computers. Maybe she'll catch on faster than we did. We shared a knowing look. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about moving forward while watching karma do its work. As the sun set over the city, casting an orange glow through my windows, I felt at peace. The family that had tried to write me off as naive had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. My new life wasn't built on revenge or bitterness. It was built on wisdom, strength, and the knowledge that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best beginnings. I raised my glass to the setting sun, silently thanking them for teaching me exactly who I could become. The story of how my husband's family tried to destroy me had become the catalyst for my greatest transformation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. My name is Patricia Robinson, and I was 29 years old when my boyfriend told me that people only invited me places because of him and that on my own, I was forgettable. He didn't shout it. He didn't say it in anger. That was the part that lodged itself deepest. The calmness, the casual cruelty, like he was offering me a gentle truth I had been too naive to understand. We were sitting in the car after a dinner party. City lights flickered across the windshield, the air thick with that heavy kind of silence that follows public discomfort. He looked at me as if he had just solved a problem, and said it like a conclusion he'd reached long before that night, not an opinion, but a fact. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just said, good to know. I met Philip Gordon 2 years earlier when I was 27. Philip was magnetic in that effortless way people adore. He remembered names, dominated conversations, turned ordinary rooms into stages. I was quieter, gentler. I listened more than I spoke. I preferred depth to volume. Small dinners, 2 crowded parties. In the beginning, we convinced ourselves we were balanced. He brought me out. I gave him steadiness, at least. That was the story we liked to tell. But imbalance doesn't arrive loudly. It creeps in disguised as jokes. Thank God I dragged you out tonight. He'd laugh. You'd never leave the apartment otherwise. Or, if I didn't introduce you, nobody would know you were here. I laughed along. It was easier than examining why those comments stung. I told myself I was lucky. Someone like him wanted me at his side. 4 months before everything cracked, the jokes sharpened. We were getting ready for one of his work events when he glanced at me in the mirror and said, "Try to be more engaging tonight. I don't want people thinking I brought dead weight." He laughed after saying it, as if laughter scrubbed cruelty into humor. I nodded. I tried harder. I smiled wider. I filled silence with questions and light opinions, as if participation could make me worthy. But I could see the disappointment in his eyes when I fell short. Subtle, restrained, but unmistakable. The breaking point came at a dinner hosted by one of his closest friends. 8 couples, expensive food, conversations built around status. I listened, as I always did, asked questions, as I always did. Philip looked at me with those same expectant glances, waiting for me to perform. On the drive home, the mask slipped. People only invite you because of me, he said. On your own, you're forgettable. Forgettable. The word didn't burn. It erased. That night, I lay awake replaying 2 years of social scenes, wondering how long I had been shrinking without noticing. By morning, I made a small decision that carried more weight than anything I'd done in that relationship. If people only wanted me around because of Philip, then I would stop going anywhere with him and see what happened. That week, he had 3 events lined up. Our calendar was always full: drinks, parties, dinners, gatherings that required planning like weddings. I never questioned whether I belonged until he told me I didn't. On Wednesday, as he buttoned his jacket, he asked, "What time will you be ready?" "I'm not going tonight," I said. He stopped mid-step. "What?" "You said people only invite me because of you, so I'll stay home. That way no one has to tolerate dead weight." He scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. I'm just listening." His expression tightened. He left without me. When he came home around 11, he dropped his shoes by the door. He didn't mention the event. I didn't ask. Friday arrived with another dinner. While I cooked for myself, he leaned against the counter. "You coming tonight?" "No." He exhaled hard. "Still doing this? I thought I'd stay home and be forgettable here," I said. "Isn't that easier for everyone?" He stared, stuck between irritation and confusion. He left anyway. He returned close to midnight, unsettled. "Rebecca asked about you," he said. "What did you tell her? That you weren't feeling well?" "Why lie? Because I'm not telling my friends my girlfriend is boycotting social events to prove a point?" "I'm not proving a point," I said. "I'm testing a theory." Saturday was Brunch Philip's favorite circle, the one that fed his ego best. He paced the apartment before finally snapping. "You're coming today." "No. People are asking questions." "What questions? About me or about you?" He hesitated. "About us, about why you're never around." "Tell them the truth," I said. "Tell them I'm forgettable." His jaw clenched. He left. At 4, he returned. No performance, no charm, just quiet. He sat on the edge of the bed staring at nothing. "What happened?" I asked. "Someone pulled me aside," he said. "Jen." My heart flickered. "What did she say?" He swallowed. "She said everyone had been asking about you all morning. Not why you weren't there, just about you." The room stilled. "She said they miss you," Philip continued. "That you're one of the few people who actually listens. That you remember things. That you make people feel comfortable." Silence filled the space where my doubt used to live. "She asked if I'd done something to make you stop coming," he said quietly. "If I'd made you feel unwelcome." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Philip's voice cracked. "She said something else, that people like you more than they like me." He looked broken in a way. I'd never seen like someone staring at a reflection he didn't recognize. "She told me they've been complaining," he said. "Not about you. About me. About how I talk over people, how I always redirect conversations, how exhausting it can be." He rubbed his hands together. "She said the only time I'm tolerable is when you're there, because you soften me, you make me listen." There was no victory in hearing that, only a strange sadness. "So when I told you people only invited you because of me," he whispered, "I was wrong. Completely wrong." "Then why say it?" I asked. "Because I was scared," he said. "If you were there, they liked you. If you weren't, they didn't like me." Over the next few weeks, the shift became undeniable. Invitations came, some to both of us, some to me alone. Low-key dinners book clubs, game nights, no pressure, no expectations, just presence. Philip watched all of it with a stunned kind of quiet, like a man learning that the world did not work the way he believed it did. One evening, he handed me his phone, a long message from Jen. Honest, unfiltered, she described months of observations, his interruptions, his need to perform. Then she wrote the line that changed everything. The only time you're bearable is when Patricia's there. When she's not, you exhaust people. Philip closed his eyes. I think I spent years pretending confidence was the same as charisma, he said. I thought I needed to be loud to matter. I didn't realize I was afraid of being forgettable myself. We didn't break up right away. Healing doesn't happen on cue. He started therapy. I started going to events alone. We corrected each other gently, but the residue remained hesitation before speaking. Relief when addressed, the quiet ache of rebuilding self-worth. 3 months after that brunch, we sat at the kitchen table as the sun went down. I don't think we can undo this, he said. I don't think so either. There was no anger, just grief for what could have been if either of us had known better sooner. We called off the engagement in March. Afterward, I expected emptiness. Instead, friendships deepened. Invitations continued. People kept showing up, not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. Not because I was attached to Philip, but because I was me. Philip moved to another city 6 months later, chasing space and reinvention. I wished him well. Growth shouldn't be punished. It simply doesn't always happen together. As for me, I stayed. I learned that being memorable doesn't look like commanding attention. Sometimes it looks like remembering stories, offering quiet curiosity, creating space instead of filling it. I wasn't unforgettable because I was impressive. I was unforgettable because I was present. I don't feel vindicated. Vindication implies winning, and there were no winners here. Just two people learning the cost of defining worth through someone else's eyes. Philip spent years convinced that I mattered because of him. When the truth came out, we realized he mattered because of me, and I mattered without him. I was never forgettable. I was simply quiet in a world that mistakes silence for insignificance. Sometimes the cruelest thing someone can do is convince you that you don't matter. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is test whether that's actually true.